Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Caesar King, the first featured 5-star defense character, has arrived in Zenless Zone 0, and there's one word that perfectly describes her: King. In this video, you'll learn everything you need to know in this ultimate guide for Caesar King. It's hard to overstate just how incredible of a character Caesar King is. When I initially heard she was a physical defense class character, my expectations were set quite low, given the fluffy nature of our first defense class character. However, let's just say Caesar puts the bounce in enemy attacks just bouncing off of you. This video was filmed on the early access server and is not indicative of the final product. There may be some changes on release, so be sure to check the comments down below to see if there are any. As usual, we'll go through her entire kit, drives and stats, wengens, mindscapes, teams, many showcases, and finally, my opinion on the one true king. No, not that OTK, this one. I had a dilemma when deciding how to approach her kit. Well, in traditional Zenless Zone 0 fashion, Caesar is yet another character that is very easy to pick up, but surprisingly complex to master. I was hoping for a short and sweet guide, but honestly that wouldn't do Caesar the justice she deserves. Let's start off with her basic attack, Rampaging Slash. Her basic attacks are largely unremarkable, although they do deal non-negligible amounts of daze, so they are usable as filler while you wait for the enemy to attack you. Pressing and holding the basic attack button will cause her to spend an assist point, and she'll do this epic Beyblade animation, which is primarily used for grouping smaller enemies and applying her action bonuses debuff. You can cancel most of her normal attacks with her special and EX special, although notably you can't special cancel her B6 when she's in midair or her spinning discus throw. Speaking of her special, let's talk about the most important part of her kit, her EX special. When she has 40 energy or more, she will perform her EX special, Parry Counter, or as I'll just be calling it moving forward, her EX1. Her EX special has a second part, Overpowered Shield Bash, which costs 20 energy, and I'll just be calling this one EX2. Her EX special, when used shortly before an enemy attacks her, will perfect block the enemy, which can interrupt them, nullifies the damage Caesar would have taken, and the block itself deals a substantial amount of daze. Triggering a perfect block also increases her impact by 20% for 3 seconds. Not only that, when you perfect block with her EX1, EX2 will now cost 0 energy. This allows for a tremendous amount of daze for just 40 energy if you time her EX1 to perfect block the enemy's attack. As we can see in this chart, her EX1 perfect block plus free EX2 right after deals an incredible 1043.7% raw daze multiplier. And as an added bonus, you can swap cancel her EX2 to make it take even less field time. Her EX1 perfect block plus EX2 is her bread and butter combo and is a great way to nullify the enemy's damage, deal tons of daze, be energy efficient, and also creates her broken shield, which is the perfect segue to talk about her shield. Caesar's shield is what makes Caesar the king that she is. Her shield is indicated by this bar next to your character, and her shield is tied to her core passive, Barrier of Resilience. Not only does it last for a comically long 90 seconds, at the max level F, it also provides 1400% of her impact stat plus 1400 shield. For most builds with Caesar, this ends up at around 4000 to 6000 shield, which is an incredible amount of shield for how accessible it is. But wait, that's not all. Unlike other shields which stick to a specific character, Caesar King's shield always protects the active on-field character. But wait, that's not all at all. Because this shield also provides substantial interrupt resistance, so your characters don't get knocked around while the shield is active. But wait, that's not all at all, because arguably, most importantly, it provides the on-field character with up to 1000 attack at level F. Yep, her shield provides a Bennett attack buff and a Zhongli shield all in one. But wait some more, because that's still not at all. Because her additional ability, which is fulfilled by simply having another character on the team that can perform a defensive assist, or someone from her squad, Sons of Kaladin. When Caesar does any of this stuff, including perfect block, retaliation, defensive assist, or her whole basic attack with the spinning Beyblades, Caesar applies a debuff to enemies within a 7-meter radius, where the enemy now takes 25% additional bonus damage. Against boss type enemies, this debuff will be indicated by this icon. So there are a few additional details absolutely worth mentioning. First is a unique mechanic called retaliation. When retaliation is available, Caesar can perform EX2 without first performing EX1. How does she get retaliation? Well, during certain attacks such as her dash attack, special, and EX special, if Caesar is attacked at specific timings, basically when she's holding out her shield, she'll get knocked backwards. When she is knocked backwards, she can then activate retaliation and immediately perform her EX2. This allows her to skip EX1 and go straight into her EX2. Another thing that activates retaliation is to simply use her defensive assist and then assist follow-up. After her assist follow-up, retaliation is now available and she can immediately perform her EX2. The reason why this is beneficial is because you can refresh her shield for just 20 energy. And if you get knocked into this retaliation state, you may as well just use her EX2 for a quick low energy cost way to both refresh your shield and to deal decent days. Speaking of defensive assist, Caesar has a great defensive assist, dealing a lot of days. Then factoring in both her assist follow-up as well as her EX2, it ends up dealing an incredible amount of days provided you have at least 20 energy. Looking at this more expanded chart, we can see many important details including her best days per second options. The standouts here are her defensive assist follow-up, EX specials, especially with perfect block, and another interesting option, her regular special with a perfect block. Her regular special is very similar to her EX special, consisting of 2 parts as well, but is performed when you don't have enough energy for her EX special. It also performs a perfect block if timed properly, and if you perfect block the enemy, she'll follow it up with her regular special too. This means that you can actually swap cancel it instantly for the whole thing to still do its job. Still, since it doesn't generate any energy, this shouldn't really be a top priority for her to do, but you can throw it out there for a bit of additional days here and there. Now the last part of her kit to talk about is her chain and ultimate. Her chain attack is worth using if you need to refresh her shield, as it, well, refreshes her shield, and her ultimate, well, it's unfortunately rarely worth using, as its days per second is pretty terrible, but it's worth noting that it does refresh her shield as well, and it deals double the days versus a shielded target for what it's worth. So now let's take a look at this full chart. You'll notice that I didn't even talk about the damage that she does. While she does deal non-negligible damage, the amount of damage she does isn't too impactful for your team's damage output, and instead, for 95% of players, focusing on her shielding capabilities and her days output will be far more valuable for their accounts. This applies for her anomaly application as well, while non-negligible should also rarely be her focus. Anyway, this chart also includes her combos, of which we can see that her special combos and defensive assist combos really stand out and should be your primary focus when using her. For example, her bread and butter on-field combo for when she has more than 40 energy is to use her EX1 right before an enemy attacks her to trigger perfect block. Then simply use EX2 and swap cancel it. The swap cancel is optional, of course. Another equally important combo is to use her defensive assist by swapping her on field right before defensive assistable enemy attacks. Then you can follow this up with her assist follow-up, and immediately after use her EX2 and you can swap cancel the EX2. Now for those that don't want to get all sweaty with all these combos, as a wise philosopher once said, EX special, now you have shield. If you want to keep it literally as simple as possible, you can literally just use her EX special to get her shield and not sweat about all the rest of the stuff. Do keep in mind though that you might want to tag the enemy with one of these aforementioned things to apply her faction bonuses 25% damage bonus. For talent priority, the game actually now has built-in recommendations, and I do agree with most of Caesar's talent priorities here. You should absolutely prioritize maxing out her core ability, as the shield and attack buff scale with it. Then, leveling her EX special and assists should be your next priority for outputting as much days as possible. After that, I'd personally level her basic attacks, and lastly, her chain and dodge. We've finally made it to the nerdiest part of the video, the math. Starting with her drive sets and stats. Caesar, being such a great universal support, is flexible with her drive set options. The general use go-to set for her is the new 4-piece Proto-Punk set. This set provides 15% more shield, and when any character in the party triggers a defensive assist or evasive assist, all squad members will gain 15% increased damage, lasting for 10 seconds. Now the uptime on this thing isn't perfect, but more damage is more damage. And Caesar being a physical character that applies a reasonable amount of physical anomaly, who also happens to enjoy spamming her EX special when she's on field, Caesar is a solid 4-piece Freedom Blues dispenser, allowing for an assault DPS character like Jane to apply more physical anomaly onto the target. Finally, while it may seem a bit odd, Caesar is actually a good user of the 4-piece Swing Jazz as well, since she can frequently use her EX special. Still, for 90% of situations, the Proto-Punk is a no-nonsense perfect set for her, and will generally be her go-to option. But there are some situations where the Freedom Blues and Swing Jazz are debatably better, and I will give one example later on in the team section. As for the 2-piece set bonuses, overall I recommend the 2-piece Shockstar Disco for most situations, for that impact percent. Although the 2-piece Swing Jazz and 2-piece Proto-Punk provide some good utility as well. As for Caesar's main stats, the most important slot is slot 6, being impact percent. In 99% of scenarios, I recommend impact percent to maximize her shield and days output. There might be some situations where energy recharge is useful, as it will allow for an occasional extra EX special, but I don't really recommend this for most situations. And honestly, for slots 4 and 5, they're not nearly as important since her damage isn't as impactful as her impact is to her kit. Generally speaking though, for slot 4, crit rate is usually the best for her personal damage output, with anomaly proficiency being situationally better, especially with Jane. Slot 5 is unsurprisingly physical damage, although attack percent and pen ratio are fine too. Frankly though, since her team damage contribution is typically fairly low, you can even equip unleveled drives in slots 4 and 5 and be perfectly fine. For her substats, again, it doesn't matter that much since she doesn't usually contribute a ton of damage, but the usual offensive stats like crit, attack percent, anomaly proficiency are all nice to have. In the long run though, it's good to eventually increase her damage with proper main stats and substats, but it's definitely not a priority in the short term. Let's ride on over to her Wenjins. Breaking news! Her signature Wenjin, Tusks of Fury, is her best option, and it's actually not even close. This Wenjin has a high 713 base attack and provides 18% impact for its advanced stat. It also increases the shield value by 30%, and when any squad member triggers Interrupt or Perfect Dodge, all squad members gain 18% bonus damage, and, based on my initial testing, all squad members also gain 12% more days. As for what counts as an interrupt, Caesar's EX special counter, defensive assists, and interrupting an enemy's attack via other methods like an EX special from another character or something, all count as an interrupt. Now I'm not 100% sure about all enemies and all situations and what all constitutes and counts as an interrupt, but hopefully this is a decent starting point for understanding interrupt. Anyway, obviously this is her best Wenjin option. Unfortunately, besides her signature Wenjin, all the other Wenjins provide less shield, less days, less damage buff, and for the most part, less damage. Overall, my most recommended free-to-play friendly option for her Wenjin is the original Transmorpher. This is a newly craftable 4-star Wenjin which provides 10 to 16% impact when Caesar is attacked. And yes, this includes her defensive assists and her EX special's perfect block. It also gives her a bunch of HP, which is, well, admittingly kind of useless, but despite this being worse than her signature Wenjin in every category, Caesar is still an incredibly great character with her free-to-play options like this original Transmorpher. Now if you want some different utility at the price of some shield strength and days output, we have the Battle Pass Wenjin, the Spring's Embrace. This Wenjin can provide a teammate of hers with 10 to 16% energy generation rate for 8 to 12 seconds, which is a neat little perk to have, but still this is fairly low impact overall. Now the next batch of Wenjins might surprise you, but it's the Stun class Wenjins. Hold on, before you grab your pitchforks and call me a heretic, some Stun class Wenjins have impact percent as the secondary stat. Remember, stun class Wenjin passives don't work with Caesar, since despite going hog wild with her Daze application, Caesar is a defense class agent. Since Caesar values having thicker shields and applying Daze, which are both impacted by impact percent, these are surprisingly usable options, providing about as much shield and Daze as her best free-to-play defense Wenjin option, the original Transmorpher. The main disadvantage though is that you actually have to level these stun Wenjins to get more impact percent, whereas for the original Transmorpher you don't actually have to level it. Anyway, any stun class Wenjin with impact percent as a secondary stat, like the Hellfire Gears, Damara Battery, or heck, even the Vortex Arrow, are all usable options for her, providing shields and Daze values roughly equal to the original Transmorpher. There are a few other defense Wenjins which I did do the math for, with some of them doing a bit more damage, but all of them honestly falling quite short in the more important categories of shield strength and Daze value, so I generally don't recommend them. Okay, now for the team section. This could be comically long or comically short, so I'm going to offer you both. Caesar can be used on nearly every single team in the entire game. Woohoo! We're done! Now get out of here and don't forget to subscribe on your way out. Alright, now for the too long did read version. Her buffs can be fully utilized by all the current damage dealers, and her shield and Daze output are obviously universal. For well-established teams like Ellen, Caesar can be used in lieu of either Lycone or Sokaku. But I have to be completely honest, Caesar did not feel like a significant upgrade over Lycone or Sokaku because, well, they are tailor-made for Ellen anyway. Still, if you don't have Lycone or Sokaku, or if you don't like furries for example, you'll find Caesar to be an incredible replacement for either of them. Similarly, Caesar can be used instead of Qingyi or Nicole on Zhu Yuan's team. But again, both Qingyi and Nicole have near perfect synergy for Zhu Yuan, making Caesar not nearly as important for Zhu Yuan if you have Qingyi. However, if you don't have Qingyi and are using Ambi, Caesar is an incredible upgrade from Ambi. Now, things get much more interesting outside of those two fully established teams. Jane is a character who I felt greatly benefited from Caesar, as that third slot was a bit awkward to fill. In this specific team of Jane, Seth, and Caesar, I have Seth using the 4-piece Proto-Punk set, and Caesar using the 4-piece Freedom Blue set with anomaly proficiency in slot 4. This allows Caesar to provide consistent physical anomaly application shred via her EX special, while also contributing meaningfully to the anomaly buildup, and also avoiding Seth's really long and bad attacks, and lowering Seth's field time by as much as possible. Personally, I like this team a lot more than the other Jane options. Anyway, it doesn't stop here. Caesar excels at elevating all the physical DPS characters that we currently have, Billy, Nekomata, and Korin. And what's really cool about these specific physical DPS characters is that they have multiple options for support. Nicole is great for Billy and Nekomata, Rina can be used with Korin, and Lucy happens to be great for all of them. Speaking of Lucy, Caesar plus Lucy forms an incredible core that can support any DPS character that can fulfill their passive thanks to either of them. For example, Soldier 11 is one of the biggest benefactors of Caesar's release. Caesar just provides such a massive damage buff over Kaleda that it's not even close. And now Soldier actually feels really incredibly powerful to use. Another neat little team is the OG Bike Gang, Piper, Caesar, and Lucy. While not as broken as Jane, Piper is still an incredible assault damage dealer and is more than enough to handle your physical DPS needs, especially with this team. Now, as of today, the current disorder options are a bit awkward for Caesar since it mainly revolves around Grace and a physical anomaly character like Jane. Using Grace without another electric character leads to Grace not having her faction bonus, but in the future I fully expect Caesar to be incredible for anomaly teams since her buffs will buff both the anomaly agents instead of just one of the anomaly agents like Seth does. Shock is another team that you need to be a little bit mindful of because neither Grace or Rina can parry via defensive assist, thus losing you Caesar's faction bonus. So you'll have to drop either Rina or Grace for someone like Anton to make Shock work with Caesar. So yeah, as we can see, the team possibilities are pretty much literally the entire cast for Caesar, which really just demonstrates just how monstrously flexible and powerful Caesar is. Well, and for Bangboos, you can see some of my recommendations for all the different teams in the B-roll, so just use whichever Bangboo makes the most sense for your current team. Up next is the king herself's Mindscapes.
Mindscapes. Mindscapes.
And investment priority. This is the part with the worst retention, so here's some hidden footage of Caesar going hog wild with her motorcycle gang. We've got two charts to go through, her personal performance chart and her buffs with Jane's assault damage as the lab rat. The first thing to note is that just Jane plus Seth, and then you add a pig, leads to an incredible 56.4% increase to Jane's assault damage. So yeah, Caesar massively improves a character like Jane's damage. However, what about going even further beyond? As we just discussed, her signature Wenjin is a great option, especially for Caesar's personal performance, improving her across the board. Although for Jane's damage, her signature Wenjin's 18% additional damage translate to roughly just an 8.4% increase to Jane's assault damage. This of course doesn't factor in the faster stun time, so do keep that in mind. We also have her Mindscape 1, which effectively gives her an instant shield at the beginning of a fight, no needing to burn energy on fodder. Not only that, but it also shreds nearby enemies' resistance by 15%, which is actually a net gain of around 12.5% damage for Jane, a larger gain than her signature Wenjin. This leads us to the age-old question of, should I get the Wenjin or Mindscape 1? And honestly, it's a pretty difficult choice. The Wenjin is on average cheaper due to its 75-25% rate, and improves her across the board. However, losing the Wenjin pull is frankly quite devastating. Meanwhile, her Mindscape 1 will increase your team damage output by more, but stun a bit slower and have a thinner shield than her signature Wenjin. Although you also get the free instant shield at the beginning of the fight. Now, losing the 50-50 on a character banner, although it is, technically more expensive, it doesn't feel as bad and it puts you closer to your next featured character. As always, I'll leave this decision to you as they are both similar in value. Moving on, her M2 increases her core ability to provide 1500 flat attack and provides her a bit of energy generation rate. This further improves Jane's damage by another 10.7% or so. M3 gives 2 talent levels, which helps Caesar do a bit more damage and stun a bit faster. M4 is really interesting, allowing you to use some EX2 specials at the cost of an assist point, while also providing more assist points on chain. This is really interesting, and while it's difficult to quantify, will definitely improve her stunning and damage potential. M5 gives another 2 talent levels, which helps Caesar do a bit more damage and stun a bit faster. And M6 will actually allow her to be a pretty competent DPS character. More testing will need to be done for her M6, but as we can see, this will drastically improve her EX specials damage. So we've made it to the showcase section, and for the first team, I wanted to highlight one of the bigger glow-ups out of, all the current cast with Caesar's release, and that being Soldier 11, because now Soldier 11 has a really top tier, support / stun character to support her, and that was something that she was missing. Like, Kaleda is really great at stunning, but unfortunately provides very little in terms of damage amplification outside of the stun itself. Whereas Caesar, she deals a ton of stun on top of obviously providing the massive buffs that she provides in. So the first thing, so before I really continue, obviously none of these runs are perfect. I did so many different runs and tested so many different teams. I can't possibly optimize them all, right? So these are just kind of like, a quick casual showcase of these teams' compatibilities and how they work together. But yeah, anyway, one reason why Soldier obviously works with his team is because of Lucy being an incredible support as well for Soldier, because she's of course Fire Element, which allows Soldier to maintain her passive while, the entire team also has their passive going as well. So we can see Soldier just absolutely dominating this run, doing tons of damage, and somehow Caesar managed to kill steal there. But, all is well that ends well. And this is, of course, the Shiyu Disputed 8 Node 2, or whatever, where you fight these two, rather dangerous enemies. And one thing I noticed about Caesar was that I don't think I was ever really close to dying. But of course, I have fought this dude a reasonable amount of time where, I've gotten fairly comfortable with the fight. Not completely comfortable, to be completely honest, but comfortable enough to where, I'm not likely to die. Anyway, I keep rambling on and on. But this next team we have is a much more free-to-play focused team with Corrin here. And the previous team, I believe, the characters used their signature Wenjins. For this one, the characters are using their 4-star Wenjins. And here we can see I'm definitely not playing Caesar very optimally. I think this was one of my earlier runs for sure. But yeah, I realized I should have been swap canceling and stuff a lot more after I started, you know, actually writing up the rest of the guide after I did my character testing. It is what it is, but we can still see here that Corrin is absolutely dominating because, well, you know, Caesar's able to give her that wiggle room and leg room for Corrin to dominate. And that also brings us to one of the very unique advantages that Caesar provides to the team, which is the interrupt resistance. And that is super great for characters that, well, don't like to be interrupted at important parts of their combo. But anyway, here we have a Zhu Yuan team, and this time we are replacing the stunner, either Ambi or Qingyi, with Caesar, of course, and we have Nicole as well. So yeah, this boss in particular is a bit not as good for Caesar because of the fact that this boss doesn't have as many parryable attacks in comparison to the previous enemy we fought, but I think we still ended up working out just fine right there. We got the stun off, and I've been doing this cool new combo with Zhu Yuan where I go for a double chain attack for Zhu Yuan. You can see there that I use Nicole to actually start the chain, and then I use Zhu Yuan as combo, and then I use Nicole to chain again in order to pump out 2 chain attacks for Zhu Yuan, which gives her a lot more ammo. We can see here that I'm short on ammo, and you know, well, you know, we're gonna get another chain attack off on them. But anyway, obviously we can see Caesar doing a great job enhancing Zhu Yuan's damage to be essentially very competitive to Qingyi on this specific team. So even though Caesar's not a dedicated stunner, the fact that she buffs damage so much and is able to output a ton of stun in some situations just as much, if not even more, than actual stunners. But I would say that's also one of Caesar's weaknesses, is that she's not a proactive stunner. She's a reactive stunner. So what that means is that if the enemy's not attacking you, and if also in Caesar's case, if she doesn't have that much energy or assist points, you're not going to get that much stun off on the enemy. Like if you have to rely on Caesar's normal attacks, if you can't rely on defensive assist like the enemy does the evasive assist moves, then, you know, you're going to be in trouble when it comes to actually stunning the enemy with Caesar. However, obviously against enemies where, you know, obviously against those types of enemies, a proactive stunner like Qingyi and Ambi are going to do much better jobs in terms of stunning. But anyway, we can see here Caesar obviously completely capable of supporting Jane Doe, completely shredding through this in record time in comparison to, without Caesar. So let's go over quickly some of the notes that I took, as well as, you know, this chart of the runs. We can see here that shark plus dog plus Oni. In this case, pig is Caesar. I guess she could be king instead of pig, but I don't know. I just made pig because there's so many animals on this list. I figured pig is the way to go. Anyway, we can see here that shark plus pig plus Oni, and this is, you know, obviously an Ellen team, is roughly just about as good as the other combinations, and that's just kind of how I felt about Caesar. Now, obviously Caesar provides a lot of unique benefits that neither Lycone nor Sokaku do provide. For example, Caesar provides that interrupt resistance to Ellen, who really enjoys being on field for the full duration of her B3, which, you know, Ellen's very vulnerable during that, but Caesar can obviously make up for that. However, if you play mainly a stun-focused team, you know, Ellen is not going to do as many attacks while the enemy isn't stunned. But yeah, anyway, we can see here that because Ellen already has such dedicated and specific supports for her, the increase and improvement, I would say, in comparison to some of the other potential teams is not nearly as large. Speaking of some of the other potential teams, we can see that the Zhu Yuan variant with Qingyi as well as Caesar instead of Qingyi is very similarly, and I think, you know, a few seconds can absolutely be attributed to just player gap. You know, one run was better than the other run because of various reasons. So yeah. Now, I didn't do any direct comparisons with and without Caesar in terms of the rest of the game because, you know, there's just way too many runs to do. But we can see here that Caesar's able to carry any of the current 4-star physical DPS characters. So yeah, again, this chart completely anecdotal. The runs and times completely anecdotal. Please take it all with a giant grain of salt, as always when it comes to these types of runs. So what do I think about Caesar? Well, as we can see, she is an extraordinarily universal character in Zenless Zone 0. She's incredible for casual players who just want to tank and spank with bigger numbers. And she's also a great character for sweaty skill expression gamers to maximize her day's output with well-timed perfect blocks and swap cancels. Caesar will also significantly elevate many DPS characters that are missing that crucial top-tier support, like currently Soldier 11, Corrin, and many others. I do think that Caesar will be an incredible character for an incredibly long time. And while perhaps she may not be the biggest damage amplifier, especially if we get 5-star support characters in the future, her incredible shielding, flexibility, day's output, and quality of life will allow her to shine for a very, very long time. At least that's my opinion. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.